My name is Liberty Blake. My work at the minute is primarily collage. I trained as a painter actually and started doing collage as a practical. I was raising my kids and trying to do art at the same time, and I needed something I could pack up and not like poison them with fumes. Over the last probably 10 years, I've been developing this particular work. Most of it is landscape, and it's generally an emotional response to a place or a situation. I do a lot, I love the outdoors, I mountain bike a lot, I spend a lot of time in nature. So I see something and I feel it kind of hits me in like a flash. And I know that moment will become a collage. I never take photographs or document that visual moment. The process is about keeping that memory, keeping that visual in my mind, and then going away and the process of time kind of eroding the precision of what I've seen. So it becomes abstracted through memory, but also I usually have a rough idea of what the color palette, the kind of general layout of the piece will be, but then the process is all about going back in my mind to that moment and kind of feeling and remembering what it was like, and then processing it with the materials I choose, which are quite specific. I use a lot of recycled papers from old books and just wherever I can source them, and that treasure hunting, that sourcing of old materials is part of the process too. It's also an important component of the meaning of the work, which is a comment on the environment and preserving things and valuing things that we already have rather than consuming more. So I do purchase paper, but try not to. I limit myself because I'm using scissors. I don't ever kind of tear paper. I always try and cut, and I'm quite specific about keeping parameters about what I do. So most of my work is pretty up and down. The subtlety of the shapes is, I'm very particular about that. So I create boundaries and I work within those boundaries, and I have to describe my environment within those parameters. I've done a lot of landscape work that has been very responsive to things I'm passionate about and excited and very positive about. But this particular body of work is wildfire series, and it stems from the wildfires that have been very forceful in California recently, specifically Northern California. My partner lived up there as a child, and one summer he was out there and a fire started fairly near where he was, and he was on hold to evacuate. And I was watching the fire maps every morning, getting up to see kind of how the fire had moved, whether the wind had changed direction, and I just got very anxious about it. As a child, I'd had this rather irrational fear of getting trapped in a building that was on fire, and I had to plan my escape from the building every night to kind of be up before I could go to sleep. So I have this kind of quite deep fear of fire. Every year as the fires got worse and more and larger and more out of control, my anxiety increased, and I just started feeling like I had to process those feelings or kind of channel them in some way. And so I started doing these collages about specific fires. They're all to do with personal experience. So each one is to do with a place that I know well that has burned, or a specific incident. This one's about my partner's father, who passed away last year. And they're really a way of processing emotion, the difficult things that are overwhelming. I can kind of put down on paper or with paper to illustrate a moment like a journal. I'll talk a little bit about these two because they're a separate body of work and an extension of a piece that I did for my first show actually at Phillips, 6 or so years ago. The idea of a self-portrait is usually, obviously much more literal, and I felt that it would be interesting to explore the idea of a self-portrait through abstraction. The first one I did was in response to, I'd gone to see the Matisse cutouts exhibition in London, and I came up to one particular piece and I was hit by this really strong emotional response to it. The intimacy of the thumbtack holes in the paper, the colour of it. I felt like I had this intimate moment with Matisse holding scissors, cutting paper, and this beautiful piece. Was crying, really, like I can still feel that feeling of seeing it. So I did a self-portrait about that moment, but I hadn't explored any self-portraits since then. And these last 2 years, I've been very much in quite an isolated place because of the pandemic, and I've been working full-time as an artist, which has been amazing. So I've been spending much more time in my own company, much more time kind of self-reflecting. And so I started again with the self-portraits last summer. Many of my family members were all kind of in quite, bad health circumstances, and I felt like everyone around me was in this really bad place. It was really kind of hard to deal with that and know what to do. So I did this piece first. I just wanted to try and, kind of like the fire pieces, I just wanted to try and process these emotions in a way that produced something rather than just spinning in my own head with anxiety. As I worked, I just tried to feel those feelings that were so overwhelming and just make something, not try and direct it or decide what it was going to look like or any sort of control. And this is why this is what I did. Yeah, I won't describe what I see because I think it's a personal thing that everyone can look at it and get from it what they want. But that was my process with that one, and then this one too. This is the witching hour. It's about when you wake up at 3 a.m. and can't go back to sleep, and you're worrying about all the most terrible things. So this is another of the self-portrait pieces, but it's much more optimistic. I wanted to try and look on places of hope and optimism and all the good in the world, during a time that has felt very dark and difficult. I've been practicing meditation and found that to be really, really a powerful way of kind of coming back to myself and what really matters. This piece is about that. I found this piece of paper here. It's an old ceramics bag. So the LV is from pounds, but it's my initials. This is me on the yellow rug, and this is my thoughts. I imagine it as I meditate, progressing upwards. This is the chaos of my brain before I start meditating, and then this is the optimism, an abstracted interpretation of that feeling of optimism and everything being right. And this blue for me this is my favorite color. That to me is pure joy, that color. I call it Matisse blue because it reminds me of his self-portraits. The very most recent series that I've really only just started is the Hilltop Garden series. It's about exploration and the search for something good. When I mountain bike, I have this urge to kind of get to the top of a mountain. This idea that there's something at the top that's special. When I was younger, we used to travel in France quite often. There were these hilltop cities, and we often would be driving along and we'd see one on the top of the hill, and we'd somehow kind of find our way to the bottom of the hill and park, and we'd hike up. And so there's something rather magical about things on the top of a mountain or a hill. It's about that optimism. It's about the hunt or the search for something slightly elusive, and that there's a struggle to get there, to climb a mountain, to search for the path up to it. And then I have these small pieces. It's a young collectors series. They're small collages. They're for people 14, I believe, 14 and under can buy them. No one else is allowed to get them. They're going to be very, very reasonably priced for young people so that they can start their collection early. I have to credit my mum. She thought of this idea. So I hope that you can come and see the show. It will be up from February the 18th through March the 11th. And I hope you enjoy it.